This is Patricia, and today I have this crochet tutorial on this really beautiful top-down shawl pattern. It's super easy. All you need to know is a single crochet and a double crochet. I am using a shawl and a cake yarn. It's just one cake of yarn that's self-striping, so you literally only have two ends to tie in or to darn in. And the self-striping yarn just creates its own beautiful pattern. And so here we go. I'll just show you the back, and it's really so lovely. And so I'm doing this in two parts. In part one, we'll do rows 1 to 12, and that's one pattern repeat, and then rows 13 on will be in part 2 and how to finish the project. And so I have this lovely little pin here, this shawl pin, but I'll just show you what I really love about what I did with this pattern was that it lays really nicely over your shoulders. And the reason for that is often top-down shawls will be just straight across, but this one I designed so that it has a V shape like that. And that V shape makes it nice to lay over the shoulders. And you can't see, but there is actually an interesting pattern in here because we're going to be creating a sort of a little bit of a textured pattern in here. So yeah, that's it's a super simple pattern. So let's get started. Now the yarn that I'm using for this project is the Lion brand Shawl in a Cake yarn, and it's a Mellow Muse as the color, and it's a cotton acrylic blend. And Lion brand is calling this a number 4 medium weight yarn. And I have used this yarn before. I used it in this project for a rectangle granny square blanket. This is the jade color. And it does crochet up very nicely, but I just don't agree that it's a number 4 medium weight yarn. So this is a number 3 lightweight, and this is a number 1 superfine yarn. And to me, this seems more like a number 1 lightweight yarn. And I'm using a larger size hook for this pattern. This is a 5.5 millimeter hook. And I'm wanting the stitches to be very loose and lacy. And then you'll need some scissors and a darning needle. Now I did start crocheting this pattern, and because I'm in the dark end of the skein, it's really hard to see this on camera. So I'm actually going to demonstrate using this number 1 fine yarn. So you'll start with a slip knot, and if you're new to crochet, I do have my beginner crochet series, and I'll put a link to that below. And so put that on your hook and get your tension set up, and you'll start with a chain 4. Then you want to crochet quite loose, and then you're going to make a ring by doing a slip stitch into the top loop of your first chain, just like that. Now you'll chain 4, and this counts as your first double crochet and chain 1. Then you're going to do a double crochet into the ring, so yarn over, put your hook through the ring, bring the yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and chain 1. And then you're going to do 4 more double crochets and a chain 1 into the center ring. And chain 1. So I'll just speed this up here a little bit. And again, you can check my beginner crochet series to learn all these basic stitches. So there's 6, and then I'm going to chain 3 and turn the work. And now we'll begin row 2. Now you'll do a double crochet going into the back loop. See how on the top of your stitches here, that V stitch, there's your front loop and your back loop or top loop. So you're going into that back loop with a double crochet and a chain 1, and then do a double crochet into the back loop of the next stitch. And do a chain 1 in between that. Eventually I'll get to the chain 1. There we go. And these can be a little bit hard to find. You want to make sure you're going into every stitch. And you're going to do that all the way along and finishing this row with a double crochet in the 3rd chain of the beginning chain 3 there. And then at that point, we'll have, this is the beginning, 9, and then for the 10th stitch you're going to do 2 double crochets in that last stitch, that beginning chain 3. So just do 1 more going into the back loop. So essentially you have 2 double crochets at the beginning and end of this row into just the 1 stitch, and then you'll chain 3 and turn your work. Now for row 3, this is actually going to be the beginning of your pattern repeat. So you have your chain 3 and you're going to do a double crochet into that base stitch of your chain 3, going under both loops and doing a double crochet, and then chain 1, and then you'll do 1 double crochet into the first chain 1 space and chain 1, and then 2 double crochets into the next chain 1 space, and chain 1, and then 1 double crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, 2 double crochets into the next chain 1 space, oops, chain 1, and now we're at the center, so we're going to work our center kind of corner here. So you'll do 2 double crochets into the chain 1 space, and then chain 2, and then 2 more double crochets into that same chain 1 space. And this will be the beginning of the sort of the triangle, the point of the shawl. And then chain 1, and then 2 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. And you're just working your way back down this side with the same pattern but in reverse. So chain 1 and then 1 double crochet, and chain 1, and then 2 double crochets in the chain 1 space, chain 1, and then 1 double crochet in the last chain 1 space, chain 1, and then you're going to finish this row by there's the 3rd chain of your beginning chain 3, and it's right there, it's tight. It got pulled out. Can't get my hook into here. I'm just going to loosen that up and I'll be back. So there we go. I loosened up that 3rd chain of the beginning chain 3. So we're skipping a stitch and going under both of those stitches there and finishing the row with 1 double crochet and 2 double crochets, going under 2 loops of that beginning chain 3, and then chain 3 and turn your work to start row 4. So now row 4 is going to be the 2nd row repeat. So from here on in, you'll be repeating row 3 and 4 and 3 and 4. So you start this row by again doing a double crochet into that base stitch after your chain 3 and going under both loops of that first stitch with a double crochet. But from here on in, we're working into the top loops of the stitches. So chain 1, and you're going to skip a stitch and do a double crochet into the top loop, and you can see there you're going into that back loop with a double crochet, and you're going to do this in every other row. You'll be going into the back loops, and that's what's going to create the pattern. And then chain one, and then skip a stitch and another double crochet into that top loop of the next stitch and a chain one. And it can be easy to skip a stitch in here, so you have to be really mindful and make sure you're skipping just one stitch and then double crochet into the next one. So you're going to do that all the way up to the corner, and I'll see you up at the corner. So now we're coming up to the corner. I have my double crochets in the corner. So I've just done my double crochet chain one. I'm going to skip a stitch and I'm going into that next stitch, and it's one stitch just before the corner, and chain one, and now we're into the corner. So we're not going to skip a stitch. These are the two chains of the corner. So you're going to go right into the back loop of that first chain of the two chains in the corner, and you're going to do 2 double crochets into that first chain of the corner, and then chain 2, and then you'll do 2 double crochets into the next chain of that chain 2 space, again picking up just that top loop or that back loop with 2 double crochets, and that's working that corner. And then chain 1, and then coming out of that, you're not going to skip a stitch. You want to do the same pattern as when you come up this side here. So you're going into the next stitch with a double crochet and then a chain 1, and now you'll skip a stitch and pick up the next stitch and do your double crochets all the way down in the back loop, just like you did on the other side. So chain 1, skip a stitch, and do a double crochet. So I'll see you at the end of this row. All right, so I have 7 double crochets coming up this way, not including those first 2, and 7 double crochets coming down this side, and I'm just coming to the end of this row. So do a chain 1 and then finish this row by doing 2 double crochets into the third chain of the beginning chain 3, and you want to go under both loops. And even though you've gone in the back loop all the way along this row, the very last stitch you want to pick up the 2 loops. There we go. Picking up both loops of that beginning chain 3. And you're going under both loops at the beginning of every row and the end of every row. And so do 2 double crochets into that last stitch to end this row. And we're going to do that for every row. There you go. And then you'll chain 3 and turn your work. And you will just repeat rows 3 and 4 until you reach row 14. So I'll just demonstrate rows 3 and 4 again, but if you feel confident, you can just skip this part. So we're going to start this repeat with doing a double crochet into the base of your chain 3 with a double crochet going under both loops, and then chain 1. And you'll always begin this row repeat with a double crochet, one double crochet in that first chain 1 space. And then chain 1, and then your 2 double crochets in the next chain 1 space. Oops. And then chain 1, and then you'll just work your way up to the corner. So I'll see you up there. Okay, so coming up to the corner, I'm going to do my 2 double crochets in the chain 1 space. just before the corner, and then chain 1, and then you're going to work your corner. So 2 double crochets into the chain 2 space, and a chain 2, and 2 double crochets into that same chain 2 space. Oops. And then chain 1. And always make sure to come out of your corner with the same pattern as you had coming into the corner. So 2 double crochets into the next chain 2 space, and chain 1, and 1 double crochet. And so you're going to work your way down to the end of this row. Now, coming to the end of this row, you should be finishing off with a 1 single crochet into that last chain 1 space with a chain 1. If not, you've made a boo-boo, so go back and see where that is. And oh, I've got that tight stitch there again. Okay, so here we go. I loosened up that stitch, so I'm just crocheting tight for some reason. So you're going to do a double crochet into that 3rd chain of your beginning chain 3, picking up the 2 loops, and then 1 more double crochet into that same stitch to finish off that row. And then chain 3 and turn your work. So again, we're repeating row 4. So there's the chain 3, and this is the row where we're going to go into the back loops or the top loops of the stitches. So this first stitch though, you're going under both loops with a double crochet, the stitch at the base of your chain 3, and then chain 1, and then skip a stitch and do a double crochet. And see, this is where it can be easy to miss a stitch. There's 2 obvious stitches, but there's a stitch that I'm going into and it's a little bit tight. So if you ever lose count, it could be that you've just missed a stitch here. So there we go. So do a double crochet into that back loop, and then a chain 1 and skip a stitch and go into the back loop of the next stitch. And you're going to do that all the way up to the corner. So I'll see you there. Okay, so coming up this side, I have 9 double crochets, not including those 2 double crochets in the beginning. And then coming up to the corner, I have my double crochet into the last stitch just before the corner. So the stitch count has worked out well. And if by chance you get up here and you have a space, a stitch before you go into the corner, you can just unravel and find out where you missed a stitch or did 2 stitches close together. But if you get later on in the shawl pattern and that happens, you don't have to unravel. Just repeat whatever you've come up to here. So if you do have a stitch here, just skip the stitch, do your corner, skip a stitch coming out, and work your way back down. You don't have to unravel at all. So here I am coming up into the corner. I'm going to do my 2 double crochets into that first chain of the chain 2 and going into the back loop or the top loop, and then chain 2, and then 2 double crochets into the next chain of that chain 2 space, again into the back loop, and then chain 1, and then coming out of the corner, 1 double crochet into the next stitch. I'm not going to skip a stitch because that's how I came up to this corner on the other side, and then chain 1, and now skip a stitch and do a double crochet into the back loop of the next stitch and chain 1, and you're going to repeat that all the way down to the end. So I will see you there. All right, so coming down this side, so I have my one stitch that I'm skipping before going into the third chain of my beginning chain 3. I had to loosen that stitch again. For some reason, I'm crocheting that beginning chain 3 too tight. But anyways, going under both loops of that third chain of the beginning chain 3, and you're going to do 2 double crochets into this last stitch at the end of this row. And then chain 3 and turn your work, or you can turn your work or chain 3. It doesn't really matter. It's totally up to you, because essentially that's the beginning of the next row. So that's the pattern repeat. So you're just going to repeat rows 3 and 4 over and over again until you get to row 14. And then that creates this really nice little ridge along here. It creates a nice texture pattern. So just work your way along, repeating those 2 rows and just paying attention when you come up to these corners here that you're in some rows you may have to skip a stitch before you go into the corner, and other rows you may not. So you just want to make sure to repeat however you've come up the one side, that you repeat that down the other side. Now carry on to row 14, and in part 2 we will change the pattern slightly and finish off the shawl. So we'll see you there.